everyone. Welcome to another episode of AI Conversations Live. I am Luisa Onnebrink, and I am once again your host for today's session. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic actually very close to my heart, and that is how to get started with conversational AI. It's a pretty hefty topic, I might say. But we'll do our best to share our tips and tricks when it comes to enabling you to really create a robust and solid foundation for your virtual agents. To give you a little bit of a backstory as to why we're even talking about this today. So I was actually one of the first, or lucky enough, I would actually say, one of the first conversation designers all those years ago. And to be fully honest with you, when we started, it was a lot learning by doing, essentially, right? We had no content out there. There was no one that taught us. We really had to learn together with our customers, with the businesses, what worked and what didn't. So it really was about defining and understanding, learning the key stages that we're trying to talk about today for the agent creating journey. So I hope that you can benefit from our mistakes, right, that we made, really benefit from the knowledge we gained throughout the years based on the hundreds of projects we put live, the hundreds of projects we designed and monitored over the years. So we have a good base to give you with when you get started. But actually, the very, very best part of today's session is that I didn't come empty-handed. I brought an absolutely amazing guest, Sonia Talati, Senior Leader of Conversational AI at GoDaddy. And Sonia, I'm so happy to have you here. Do you want to say a few words about yourself and maybe also what brought you to conversational AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk about this, and just thank you to the audience for being here, for thinking about how to get started. What you already are doing or what you're intending to do helps and spreads for so many people. And that's the beauty of AI. So I got started in this space quite randomly, but I really fell in love with conversational AI. I was a journalist and I wanted to know how I can curate conversations that I did like on video or on TV or on my columns using technology. So for me, it was a marriage of creativity and technology. And that's really what this space has been for me. It's such a unique spot where we get to be both very technical and, engineering oriented sometimes. And then we also get to be really creative and fun. So I currently work at GoDaddy, and I lead a team of conversation designers that help and produce our customer-facing chatbot experiences. And I'm happy to share that experience. I also used to have my own startup that essentially helps create bots for individuals. And I've worked at numerous other places like Anthem and Geico here in the United States. So lots of experiences, definitely been a journey. And wow, like where we are as an industry before and now is very, very different. And I really wish I had something like this to resort to when I got started. But, we made a lot of stuff up, tried it out, and here we are. So looking forward to this conversation and sharing those learnings.
Oh, I appreciate it, Sonia. When you said journey, for me, this is the ultimate word, the ultimate term to use when it comes to conversational AI and creating virtual agents. For me, it's all about the journey, right? It's not a one-stop shop and you just plug and play and you're good to go. It's really about considering so many different stages. So you really spoke my language there, this interdisciplinary field that really never gets boring, right? It's so much more than just a couple of buttons to press and then you're ready to go. And this really is actually why we're here today, because I wanted to emphasize that one of the learnings we had, that while it's such an exciting process, right? So amazing, so exhilarating to add this AI layer to your conversational repertoire as a business, right? You also often, and we see that really quite a lot, you underestimate, we tend to underestimate the building stages, the planning stages of this entire process. So very often I see businesses thinking about conversational AI like this: design, build, deploy. And that sounds really easy, right? Design, build, deploy. I can do this. Anyone can do this. And I'm not arguing that not anyone can do, AI. I really think that everyone should and can do AI. Today, we don't need a computer science degree anymore to create really, really incredible conversational experiences, right? But I still think that we still underestimate. So to get to these incredible, incredible flows, we need to make sure that we're looking a little bit more at the journeys and trying to now, specifically when we see up there design, right? What does it trickle down to? What are the stages that we actually, maybe like little branches, need to go down to and focus on? Because it really isn't just 3 steps. It's actually quite a bit more. So I think we should step back from saying things like, oh, it's simple, right? It's just FAQs. I'm just going to build a bot that does smart routing. Nothing more. It's okay. I don't need much. Well, I think both Sonia and I agree that you might need to have a bit more consideration on those planning stages. So we argue it's a little bit more like that. I know. When you see this, you probably think, good Lord, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm out. However, these stages, even though there are 11, and I know 11 is a lot, sounds a lot also to me, but they are so crucial and they flow so easily one to another. They really mesh into this really absolutely robust and I would say almost necessary, mandatory base for a virtual agent that is then at some point even ready to undergo changes, learn with you, adapt with you, with your business in this really, incredible changing, fast changing times, right? So you can easily, based on this base that you're creating, really scale up. So you're ready for this journey, right? That we're always talking about. And I have to also promise you, based on our experience, following these steps and looking at what each of these steps actually entails. And definitely Sonia and I are going to dive into these steps a lot more in detail, right? So when we're actually looking at each of these steps, it's going to reduce development time for sure for your project. We're going to make sure that the build is a lot smoother, the base is a lot more robust, right? So it's really, you can only really succeed when you're implementing these kind of considerations. And of course, scalability, I know, is a big argument for this. So you don't have to do much back and forth changes. You're saving time and you're ready for whatever may come in this journey for you. Because I think we see quite often that you don't just ever put one use case out there and then your bot is ready and set for the next 10 years. It grows, it changes, and so do you, right? And so do your customers. And you need to have a bot that can actually change with you. So let's dive right in, I say. First and foremost is defining your objectives and scope, right? Here, the first thing that usually comes to mind when I talk about objectives and scope is that I call this quite often the what and the why stage. So I need to understand, what am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to create here? Is it, like I've written here, customer support that I'm trying to automate, maybe a couple of FAQs, the most frequently asked questions and requests I'm getting? Am I trying to have my virtual agent as the first line of defense whenever I need information that at some point is going to be passed on again to a human on the other end, right? To do follow-up questions? Or am I automating a whole set of very complicated tasks? I need to understand that before I can move forward. I need to know what I am doing. And then the why, right? And this is why I wrote here KPIs. We need to understand, why are we doing this? Am I actually trying to alleviate work on my currently already existing contact center and human representatives? Am I trying to take over an already existing IVR, for example? Am I just trying to renew it, go with the times, make it more conversational? What is it really that I'm trying to do? Or am I actually starting from scratch and my customers maybe have no collection or interaction with an IVR or any kind of conversational AI before, right? So those are super, super important points to consider before you get started. And one really cool thing about this webinar is that I actually asked our product and conversation design team before actually joining the session to ask them, what do you think is really important for those planning stages? And one of the tips that our conversation designer, Dana, actually gave me today was, the most important thing is that we don't just look at the journey within the virtual agent. I need to, in those planning stages, and specifically now when I'm looking at what am I trying to achieve, I need to also see where am I placing the virtual agent. I need to look at the entire user journey. So even from the second that it actually gets into my business, the second that I actually am picking up the conversation or getting the text message, maybe I have an IVR in front, right? And I'm just routing to the virtual agent. I need to know those things. I need to plan exactly the start point of where my customers are actually engaging with the business to the very, very final end of getting their query resolved. So she said, make sure we're evaluating the entire journey, which includes also everything around the virtual agent that I'm adding. Let's jump to the next one. It's only going to get more interesting from here. Knowing your customers. I think while I think a lot of people would say, yeah, of course, I know my customers. I know exactly what they want. I know exactly why they're communicating with me. It is super, super important to, before even designing the conversation, to understand who are my customers, who's my audience. I need to make sure I look at, for example, factors like age, their location, their language preferences. Obviously, anything like communication style and basic interaction preferences. I need to know that, because otherwise I might actually deploy the wrong bot. Imagine, for example, you have a very, very tech-savvy, super fun, fast-paced startup with a very, very young audience. What do? What I would suggest, for example, here is learn from the kind of, tech savviness, the fun parts, right? And maybe implement, instead of a voice bot, I would maybe implement a chat bot, right? Something that actually fits the business. So I really always need to look at who am I talking to and then pick them up from where they are. I need to know what my customers prefer and who they are before I can actually move to the next step. And the next step is a super important one, choosing the right technology for my project. And on top of that, choosing my involvement of this business, right, in the project. And one of the things that I quite often give as an argument here is that I need to understand what I need as a business. So, for example, do I have a tech-savvy team that doesn't shy away from maybe a more development-heavy platform, right? So the code versus no-code, low-code question. Maybe I just want to have a platform that is very easy, very intuitive, very easy to scale as well. So I don't need to have a computer science degree to move forward. And I don't need to have that huge team of techies to move me forward, right? I can do this very easily. I can do this very quickly. For some businesses, this is important. And this is something, for example, that the Vonage AI Studio focuses on. The very easy implementation, very easy to build a robust flow. It's very much low code, no code, and still giving you the best of both worlds, in a sense that you can very much still create a very, very effective virtual agent on both text as well as voice channel. Another question that I would always ask here is self-service versus managed, right? I would probably go for a platform, depending on my needs, that I have the option to either build myself or have a team that I can learn from. And this is exactly where conversation designers come in, right? Usually those folks are the ones that really guide the process. They give input, they make decisions, they really show us how to scale on a level that is, okay, when you get started, this is a robust and amazing framework for your agent, right? So the conversational abilities that we often underestimate are something that a really highly skilled team of conversation designers can bring in. So always looking at that option, does a platform offer this to me, yes or no? And then maybe go with one that fits whatever you need. Another really important point, and this is something also that Sonia is talking about quite importantly, right? The new rise of generative AI, large language models, I think we all heard it, right? So maybe you as a business, you don't have the knowledge or the time to invest in what we're later going to talk about, like training, response generation, and all that jazz. Now, these are super important stages, right? Super important parts of your building journey. But if you prefer to outsource this to generative AI because you really believe in the rise of it, you really need the supporting hand of it, and you want to test it out, go for it, right? It's amazing. So then maybe go for a platform that offers to outsource intent creation, response generation. All of this supports outsourcing that by generative AI. And Sonia, I think this is a really, really important question for you. How should a business actually really go about when choosing the right AI tool? Because I mentioned a couple of different points, but I'm sure based on your experience, you have quite a few more to share.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so, so important because this tool is going to live by you day by day. So if there's aspects of it that end up being frustrating, guess what? That's the frustration you're going to carry with yourself as yourself, your team, day in, day out. And that's what a lot of the engineers are going to deal with. So it's so important to pick the right tool. And the first step is really determining that, and you hit the nail on the head with this, self-service versus managed. Do you want to create something that is homegrown at your company? It's going to take more effort. It's going to require engineering effort. Or do you want to have a tool that's already ready to go? And I think that's a really important decision. And obviously, a lot of companies have different reasons why they do a homegrown tool, whether they want to develop their own product or they simply want, full rights over the security and privacy that it entails in the data stream. So it just really depends on what's feasible within your organization. But that's a very important decision to make, and it will really serve you. So let me go into a little bit of like how to think about which one and what are the things to consider. One is the model that it's running on is really, really important. So, we're in the generative AI space now and moving forward. So, is it using ChatGPT? What are the parameters of that? Because that model and the quality of it is going to determine how well those interactions are with your audience and your users. So super critical, super, super critical. This is my number one decision point is with the quality. Because if you're frustrated by the responses, then all of a sudden we're not able to get past that point. So pick a tool that, really allows for flexibility and the right kind of model for you. Number two is think about ease. You hit the nail on the head with this one. Like, it needs to be easy to use. If it's going to be difficult, if it's very manual, if it's not user friendly, the UX of it is clunky, it becomes difficult to navigate and kind of see what's happening and decisions to move forward in. It just kind of clouds judgment. So I think ease of the tool is really, really important. Let's see, what else? How does it, what all does it cover? What are the different aspects of it? Because like you mentioned, there's so many different aspects to consider in this process. So the data aspect, the ability to advance and change. So does it have a data tool built into it? Is it the kind of data tool that you'd actually use and work with? Does it have the ability to maybe experiment if you wanted to try multiple different things at the same time? Does it have the ability for you to go to new markets? Does it have the ability for you to be in multiple languages? So thinking about all of the different aspects that the tool has, does that support your current and future needs? That's the key. Think about what you want, where the product could potentially go. And I always err on the side of picking something that is going to allow for that growth. So don't stunt yourself. Don't pick something that is good for now. You probably will want something more than that at a later date. So, and changing tools is always hard. So might as well start with something that's wonderful.
Sonia, I think this might have been actually one of the most important parts of the webinar today, when you said pick something that's not only going to serve you today, but also for the future. Think about what you might want to add to your agent going forward. I think this, Sonia, thank you. This was super, super important. So if you take anything away from today, this is one thing.
Yeah, we're working in a space where the technology is evolving every couple months. It is, and sometimes in ways that we don't expect. Last year at this time, ChatGPT had just come out. Maybe we wouldn't have predicted that, maybe we knew it was going to happen at some point, but every year this technology improves and changes. And if the tool can't adapt to that and doesn't have the structure to adapt to it, it becomes difficult to evolve along with the industry. So the other point related to that is picking a tool that is governed by, if it's homegrown, then that you have that support at your company, or if you're using a partner tool, that it's credible and you're going to have that ongoing support. So just like you want to grow, evolve, and improve your chatbot or chatbots, be with a tool that's managed by folks who also are going to grow and improve that tool. And that you're going to have that kind of support, because that will be important in terms of that longevity again. So I definitely add that piece to it. You don't want like a clunky, there's so many tools out there, and it's been beautiful to watch the evolution. I remember when the industry started, everything was a startup, right? Every tool was new. Now we have more advanced tools and, large companies coming up with really beautiful, easy to use tools. So pick something that, is not clunky. Pick something that is elegant and with a source that you can trust to continue developing in that way. That would be my main advice. And last but not least, I'll add on is it's great to come up with all these ideas, talk to your stakeholders about what's feasible, because whether it's a managed tool or it's homegrown, there's going to be other teams involved. Either engineers going to have to build it, or there's going to be an implementation process. And do not underestimate how long an implementation process can take, because there's multiple teams involved, different backlogs. So just be mindful of what's actually feasible and for the company as well. Like that will be a big factor. So have that communication going on.
Absolutely. And I think the most important part is to always remember there are experts like Sonia out there that if you're stuck and you have so many options to choose from, consult with a conversation designer of your choosing, right? We're here, we're there, Sonia is there. So, worst case, consult, and we'll be sure to give you the right advice based on your I would say parameters, right, Sonia?
Yeah, 100%. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share my thoughts.
Perfect. Okay. Well, now when we're talking about the right technology, I think the only next step is obviously gathering data for our newly chosen platform, right? And when I'm saying data sets here, I mean very, very specific types of data. I mean transcripts, I mean recordings, really go down to the nitty gritty of how the conversation looked like before you implemented a virtual agent, before you implemented AI. We want to make sure we can learn from the real life experience that your customers had before we're adding a virtual agent to it. So we can make sure that whatever we're designing is actually built on the excellent conversations, interactions your customers had beforehand, right? We don't want to actually decrease the service. We want to elevate it, right? And that is what we need to learn from everything that happened prior. So having domain-specific data, anything about the industry you're operating in, what are the most relevant queries, what are customers most excited about, preferences, most relevant topics, pain points, right? Those things really are what we need to focus on here. Learning from past experiences, and then, of course, moving that straight away to the design stage of our building journey. I would say this is super important in terms of having something that, when Sonia spoke earlier about stakeholders, right? Stakeholders come in at all these different stages. Really make sure we have the entire user journey mapped out, share it with everyone involved. We can all be on the same page. We can at this point say, okay, we talked about our objectives, we talked about our KPIs, and we have all of that already put together, right, in a flow chart, and we can agree on where we're actually putting this down in text, in design, because one of the things that, for example, our product manager said is that whenever we're utilizing a new project and we're trying to move it to the next step, so often we're forgetting that there are many stakeholders that need to sign off on the next stage. And then we're moving too fast. Someone that's very important in a decision-making process hasn't said he's okay. We maybe need to revert a step back. So we're actually adding too much time to the process that we can save by having, for example, a tool like Draw.io, Lucidchart, whatever it may be, mapping out the flow, mapping out, again, the entire journey from when the customer is contacting the business to the final resolution, right? Mapping it all out, really putting the use case down into actually tangible little branches, making sure we have everything written down that everyone can agree on. So really making sure this is a collaborative effort. And only when everyone agrees, we're moving ahead to the next stage, which actually is training and response generation. One of my absolute favorite, and I think as a conversation designer, this is really where the fun starts, right? Where we need to look at, okay, now we know our audience. Okay, how do we actually put this into tangible training results, right? How do we really make sure the training is as robust and close to real world scenarios as it can be? So here we need to put our thinking hat on and make sure that the proper training that we're actually really need to consider here is really there to minimize the risks of churn, right? And also, of course, misinterpretation. So I think what I want to reiterate here is that we need to make sure that we adapt the training of the virtual agent to all kinds of different user expressions, colloquialisms, different types of language, because just because you say it in a certain way, it doesn't mean that the next person refers to the same thing in the same way, right? We need to really be able to be ready for all eventualities, for all different ways of how users can express a question, a query, or any kind of request, right? So this is super, super important, as precise as possible. And basically, of course, looking at what we already said before, looking at the data and making sure we can translate it that way, right? Now, one of our special conversations and our tips here was actually crafting conversations effectively, and specifically the questions in those conversations is really important. And what she was referring to here was actually to word the questions in a way that we're getting the best response. We're getting the best value out of that question. Because one of the parameters when you're adding a virtual agent, right, is we want to save time. We want to get them there fast and efficiently. So imagine a question like, are you calling about your reservation? Then the only answers I usually give, right, are yes and no. That's what comes to my mind. What if I'm trying to make it a tad smarter? I'm trying to get more information out of the user in the first place. I'm saying something like, are you calling about an upcoming or past reservation? So again, very similar questions, but with a very, very big difference of me trying to really get the efficiency out of my agent build, specifically, of course, also with the training. All right, Sonia, is that something that you would agree on? Is there something that you think when it comes to training and like a special tip like that you would add?
I really love that, and I think you covered it. Yeah, I think you really covered it. You nailed it. I love this. If anyone's watching this presentation, like, this is golden. I wish I had this. It's beautiful.
I mean, this is just two conversation designers being really dorky about their passion for conversational AI. So I really appreciate this, Sonia, that we can geek out about this together.
I know.
And I think, right? And I think one of the really important parts is that in the beginning, I think we tend to think, the platform has so many amazing tools and features, so we can use the natural language understanding and processing capabilities, or maybe even generative AI, right, for taking care of the training set. So we're relying a lot and maybe too much, right, on those features instead of actually really thinking about the necessity of smart training, right, smart training for success. And earlier we said, when we were talking about the choosing the right platform, right? We also said how important it is when talking about generative AI to really see, is that something that fits me? Sonia, I read so many of your articles about the switch from the just NLU, the simple NLU, simple NLP to large language models and generative AI. in your opinion, based on your experience, and I know it's only been this year, right, where it's been the buzz, but in your opinion, how does a business actually decide to move towards generative AI and implement that for formulating intents, user expressions, and all of that, and also, of course, agent responses? What would you say makes someone go, yes, this is for me?
Yeah, 100%. That's a fantastic consideration. So generative AI, from my perspective, is the future. And, I think for businesses, really the main thing is like cost right now, but we can expect that will change, right? Like this is a new technology, and that will change over time. So again, how do you decide based on what's going to be setting up for the future? So, right now that's something that a lot of companies might be thinking about, but I encourage everyone to bring in that perspective of what's really best for the user. And for me, when I think of like what it opens a door for, it's so amazing. You can do it takes care of that training aspect so much quicker than our NLU models do. Like you kind of don't have to worry about it. So like on my teams that I've been in, I spend so much time on training with NLU and NLP. Mm-hmm. So eliminating that is like, oh my God, now I have all the space to think about how do I want to scale to different markets? How can I take this and make it an amazing customer experience? So really explore the generative AI options, see what your business can support right now, and advocate for it if you feel like it's the best customer solution. And look and analyze what happens when, play around and see what happens in those customer scenarios that you're building the experience for, and cross compare, what's possible. And I think from that, it'll be easy to see what the net difference is. Now, having said that, I do think that NLU and NLP have a place, but maybe more so like the way I envision it is that sort of like for rote conversations, so where what the different answers might be. I think it's like way better for like multiple choice type conversations, where it's like a form but in a conversational format, or it's onboarding, for example, where you need to pull the customer in and you need to pull particular flags, and it's a very structured approach. Then that might be the right option for somebody right now. But generative AI is much better at being fluid and flexible and dynamic. So if that is required, then that really is the way to go. And I think the cost question starts dissipating when you start looking at the benefits of it, and also the promise in the longer term beyond the next couple months or the next year, because that will change. So,
wow,
yeah.
100%. So no, I agree with you so much. I think right now what really holds us back, I think, from utilizing it more is also that we might not understand it 100%. Even the people that are so hands-on with generative AI at the moment, I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what we can do with it. And when you said like, yes, NLU has a place to stay, absolutely. I think there are, like you said, brilliant scenarios for it, but I think exploring what generative AI can do right now is super important. I am excited for it. I know that as an ex-conversation designer, I see so many different ways of supporting my flows with generative AI, in a way, supporting the users on the other end with conversational AI and generative AI in that particular spot, of course. However, I think one point that for me always rings this one bell when I hear generative AI is, of course, what about privacy? What about ethics? Those kind of considerations, right? And I think, even though it comes up now mostly in the connection with generative AI, I think it is still super, super relevant for any type of flow. I want to make sure that whenever I'm implementing it, am I compliant with the data protection regulations in my country, in my with my user base, am I, for example, for the European audiences specifically relevant, right? GDPR compliance, HIPAA compliance for the medical sector, right? Those are super, super important things. We want to build trust, and we want to have the way that we're handling sensitive data to be something that is transparent. We want to have protocols around it as a business. We want to make sure that our customers on the other end feel that their sensitive information is being treated as such, because otherwise I think there's a very hard way coming back from that, right? So having these clear privacy protocols, I think, is an absolute must-have in building this trust. So 100% a super important stage in this journey. Now we're handing it over to one of my absolute favorites, and maybe as a conversation designer, again, something that I'm getting excited about, the elegant fallbacks, because I think so often it happens, it's normal. I almost said it's human, right? But not really anything is human right now here, but avoiding loops, right? We want to make sure that our customers have a seamless experience, a satisfactory experience. They want to call back in, message back in, and are happy to converse with the virtual agent. And part of it is that we want to avoid agent failure. So having the mechanism to seamlessly hand off to a human agent, no matter if it is in a voice-based conversation or on the text-based channel, we want to do that at all times, because there are queries that not only deserve to be handled by a human because they're super sensitive and super complex, or maybe we already got to a point in the journey where it's really our last resort to save this poor customer from endlessly going back and forth in the agent without any resolution. However, one thing that, again, is a super secret conversation designer tip, right, is also making sure that we're a little bit tweaking how we see agent failure. And what I mean with that is that before we even get to agent failure, we kind of like implement almost a little bit of a trick, right? So when I'm asking a question like, could you please give me your order number so I can check for the previously asked order tracking information, right? Then usually I would say like 1567LB, something like that, right? A long number. Now let's imagine someone says, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it here, right? So that already constitutes as agent failure. The agent maybe might not be trained for that. And we're going to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Let me transfer you to a human. What we want to do now is actually add this little bit of hinting, this little bit of added support in the reprompt. So instead of saying, sorry, can't help you, and immediately say, okay, this is agent failure, we're going to say something like, oh, I'm sorry, no problem. Your order number is located on the right side of your order confirmation. I can wait here on the line while you get your order confirmation ready, and then you can give the number through again. Something like that, right? There are many, many different ways of really sprinkling in this tiny bit of added hinting, this added help to kind of like avert maybe a potential agent failure. Next up, thorough testing. Now, whenever I talked to a customer before, I always made sure that even before anything moved forward, I said, listen, guys, you need to make sure before anything moves forward, you allocate times and resources to testing. Make sure that you're actually putting this in the calendar. You say, okay, this is my time frame, and this is how much time, hours, days, whatever it may be, I allocate for testing. And then don't just make sure that one person is calling in 5 times or messaging in 5 times, testing it, and says, yes, we're good to go. Let's make sure we have a lot of different users, different backgrounds, different ages, different intonations. Obviously, a very, very broad amount of users that actually can then mimic, I would say, like a real world adjacent scenario, right? Where we can make sure that whatever feedback we're getting back then, we can utilize and really smartly validate the current agent's performance and improvise it to make sure that whenever we're ready to put this live, it's actually something that mimics or at least shows in some way how the vast amount of diverse users in the real world are going to interact with it. I promise you this will save you so much headache if you invest in a thorough testing period, various different users, very different types of users, different accents, different ages, anything that you can have to really conduct thorough beta testing is super, super important. Obviously, then go ahead and approve it based on their feedback. When it comes to the deployment stages and monitoring stages, this is really where we're getting a bit more nitty-gritty into, okay, we're moving back to the stakeholder point. There might be some folks that we actually need to, at some point, show progress, right? How is my virtual agent doing? Am I tracking the wait time correctly? Am I handling enough conversations in the virtual agent, or am I still transferring too many out of the virtual agent to a human, right? This is really the stage where I need to establish KPIs. I need to have the key performance indicators that show how well my virtual agent is doing, how well my project, my journey is going, right? So this is important. Sonia said it earlier, pick a platform that has the reporting that you need for your business. So any kind of monitoring platform, look at it prior, make sure that whatever you want to get out of your journey, out of the user expressions as key data points, you can get from the platform that you're choosing. So have a look at it prior, set everything up. For example, on the AI Studio, what you can do, you can place tags, right, as little milestones in the conversation to not only track the performance of the agent. So, for example, the response time, or how many conversations were handled by an agent versus by a human, or any of these kind of metrics. But you can also really learn about the users. You can make sure you understand, why are they actually contacting me? What are the topics that they are requesting most? Which path are they going down most often? On what day, at what time? You can really see how seasonal spikes are affecting your business. So reporting is really maybe the alpha and the omega of this particular journey. Because again, at the end, you need to have something to show for all of the work you put in. And this is something that you can only do by having reporting that you can then map with your KPIs. Last but not least, we're nearing the end. Continuously monitoring and optimizing, right? This is exactly what I said earlier. Looking at the KPIs, do they match with what I expected? In the beginning, both Sonia and I said, it really is a journey. And this is, I think, the best way to describe it. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and there's always something to be learned from our customers. They will evolve, they will adapt, they will change. There will be things like generative AI coming out of the ground, right? And we need to be prepared for that. We need to look at those interactions, and if we're willing to listen, and I highly encourage you, as anyone with a virtual agent out there, look at how your users are interacting with it and derive insights from it that in turn you use to improve the experience. Our users are going to change. We need to listen. We need to adapt to keep up the excellence of our conversational AI experience. And I think the question you need to ask yourself then is, have I met the objectives that I set in stage one and the KPIs that I set throughout my journey, right? This is the key indicator. So then we're going to go back and make improvements if needed. So after hearing all that, I want to go back to Sonia, because I think I now sprinkled in so many different tips and tricks, right? But I want to take a step back and really see, okay, what could happen if you're not actually implementing these specific steps? So Sonia, what kind of challenges or complexities have organizations encountered that you worked with when they started with conversational AI and maybe made a couple of different mistakes here and there? And how did you address these challenges when they came up for them?
Yeah, sure. I can think of 3 challenges that have come up, and these are pretty repetitive in terms of the different projects that I've worked on over the course of my career. So the first one is decision metrics. Make sure you have your decision metrics set and the mechanisms in order to get the data. And this is going to be really important, because this is, like you just mentioned, how will be your guidance as far as what to improve, what to monitor for. And without that, it becomes difficult to really know what's going on. So I'm going to share a few decision metrics to this crew that are worth considering as you're going forward in this. So one is, you want to know your volume. You want to know how many people are interacting with it, and does that, meet the needs that you're hoping for. You want to know the amount of time that the interaction took, and ideally have specificity as far as that time between responses as well. That will tell you a lot as far as like what's happening in that customer journey. Maybe you're providing an instruction, they're going and doing it. So yeah, maybe it took a couple more minutes for that step, or maybe something that was said, it's taking a long time. And then you need to know the third metric I'll share is abandonment. Where are people leaving and dropping off in the conversation? This is a great way of knowing where to improve design. If there's a lot of people doing it, there might be something worth improving upon. So definitely want to know the abandons by step. You want to know how many people actually completed and got the help for the task that they came in for. Like that's ultimately the point of this, right? Is we want to have an interaction in which we're probably supporting or answering or helping to know something. So did that happen? This one I will say is challenging because sometimes to know something has happened is outside of the chatbot experience or the voice bot experience. So it might be a little bit difficult to get this. But there are other ways besides having to do a holistic measurement. You can start using qualitative data, or you can start doing analysis of the conversations in a good number, a good batch. So, say you look at a couple hundred transcripts, you'll probably get a good idea if people are successful or not. It's amazing how much looking at conversations tells you the story. That is the most valuable thing to do as a designer. Look at what's happening. You'll see the trend, and it'll really help you decide what to do. So those are some of the metrics that I highly recommend considering as you're working towards building something, and doing that really upfront because they will be your guidance. The other thing is really having a clear purpose. Like generative AI is so cool. Conversational AI is so cool. And there's so much excitement about it. And we hear those terms all the time, right? Like it's so cool what you're working on. Okay, yes, it is cool. I love it. But what we can't just do things because for the sake of doing things. Why are we doing it? So have a really clear purpose as to why you're using the tool. At the end of the day, it's a tool to help you with something. So what is that tool for? And defining that purpose will go a long way because it's such a hot tool that you'll get all kinds of requests of like, oh, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? So really know what it is that you're developing and make sure, it's aligned with the organization, whatever your goals are, so that it can be a very strong and tailored experience at the end of the day. So that's one thing. Of kind of something I've learned. And then the third thing is make sure it serves the purpose of what it's for the audience. So, on the design side, we get to have this beautiful experience of curating something, and we're curating a dialogue. So, but we're doing it in a black box because the person we're talking to is not in front of us as we're doing it. So really, really, keep in mind that what you're working on is a dialogue and it is a relationship. There's a back and forth. So who's on the other end? What is going on there? What are they experiencing? Are they getting the help that you need? So really, really think of that as like you're having that back and forth, just like two people would. And when we're talking, we're here looking at each other, we're seeing cues. I'm making sure I'm answering your question and not just what I think it should be, right? So the same thing goes with the conversation. Make it a conversation. So those would be my tips for that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like making the interactions, not just interactions, but actually the way that you would want to speak to someone and want to be spoken to, right? It's really, I don't want to make it sound simpler than it is, but I think if you keep that in mind, I think you have a really big step already, made in terms of how you think about the designing and creation process, right?
Right, 100%. And it's like the one thing that I've noticed I've spent more time in than I would have thought is it's great to build that ideal conversation, right? Like that script, like this is what's going to happen. But most of the time, that's not what the user is experiencing, they'll have surprising responses. They might have help and get stuck in areas. So that fallback piece you talked about, I think, is where all of the beauty lies of what it is there to work on. So really, really think about what it is the person in front of you is saying and desiring, and all the different variations of it.
Yeah, I like to whenever I talk about it with someone, I like to call this like the magic, right? The magic and the heart piece of the entire process of the virtual agent really is the conversational abilities. And we talked so much now also about the rise of generative AI. And one of the questions that our LinkedIn audience posted in the event was actually about what to do really as a business when they want to, stay ahead of the curve, because generative AI caught us all by surprise. Almost by surprise. Some of us, were more, in the space than others, but I think some businesses were like, okay, what do I do with it? How do I do it? And what is it going to do in the future? So what tips would you give organizations and individuals if they want to really stay ahead of the curve and make sure that they can adapt and evolve with those kind of, very fast-paced developing technologies, right, in this space?
Yeah, I think the first thing is like spend 5 minutes in one of the generative AI tools. So like in ChatGPT or whatnot, it'll tell you so much. And then after those 5 minutes, it's really thinking about it as a tool. It is expansive. It can do a lot more and more quickly than previous tools. So where does it find its place, and what does that look like? I think that's it's really as simple as that. And maybe there's no place for it, but maybe there is. So figuring that out.
I really think it's about getting your dipping your toes into the generative AI space, right? And just being ready for whatever might actually come at us in the future. And I think it can. I think it's going to be exciting. I mean, I'm more excited than worried, even though I think some people might still be, still a bit in shock as to the incredible capabilities that generative AI actually has at this point, right? So I
100%.
think,
and it takes the mystery away. Take the mystery away. Like if you start playing around with it, it takes the mystery away. You start seeing what it is, and it's less scary. It's more actually. The mind starts going to where does this fit into my organization? What can I do with it?
And we're going back to the beginning, learning by doing, right? So it's always gonna get your hands dirty, do your research, and you're gonna be just fine.
Yep.
So as we said earlier, this is kind of like where we're going to close the session. But one thing I still want to reiterate really is that it is never going to be a plug and play situation adding conversational AI to your journey. It's always going to be something a lot more than just a one-time task. The virtual agent is going to grow with you and be with you for a very, very long time. So when Sonia said earlier, choose a platform based on what you want to achieve, not just tomorrow, but also next year or 5 years from now. Make sure that you understand it's an ongoing process. It's a journey, and embrace this journey. I know there's going to be tons of ups and downs, lots to learn, but you need to be open for it to really create this absolutely successful and comprehensive experience for your customers. And we said so many times you need to revisit the conversations and maybe even revisit the steps that we said, right? Use them as a cheat sheet of how to really have this robust base, right? So adapt to the changing customer needs, adapt to the changing business needs of your own business, right? Because you are going to evolve. You need to have a bot that can grow with you as well. And then be ready for things like generative AI and many other developments that might come at you from all sides. But if you have a robust build, it's much easier to also think about, okay, everything is changing. I can change with it. I can maybe even scale with it, right? It's a whole other topic, but having a robust end stages, right? Putting it into one build is really, really important. So we'll give you a robust kickstart to your journey. And I really hope that you can take a lot of these brilliant tips from Sonia and myself home with you today and into your journey. And again, If you ever have anything you need support with, please let us know. Please contact us. You will know where to find us. Find us either me here at Vonage or Sonia on LinkedIn and GoDaddy. So Sonia, thank you so much for today. Thanks everyone that was here today and listened to us. I know I had a lot of fun speaking about my passion. So again, thank you, Sonia, for being here and geeking out with me for the last
thank you.
hour.
Thank you for your leadership and driving this. This was awesome. And I hope this is beneficial to everybody.
All right, you heard it, guys. Get your hands dirty, experiment, play around with it, and find what is right for you and your business. All right. Thank you very much and have a good rest of your day, guys.